What if some of the world's most powerful healing plants have been hiding in plain sight for over 2,000 years? Long before pharmacies, antibiotics, or modern supplements, traditional Chinese medicine was already using roots, leaves, bark, flowers, and fungi to treat pain, calm inflammation, fight infection, strengthen the body, and restore balance from the inside out. And here's the surprising part. Many of these ancient healing plants are still being used today, not just in herbal clinics and old family remedies, but increasingly in modern research as well. In this video, we're uncovering 18 healing plants from traditional Chinese medicine that have stood the test of time, trusted for generations to help with everything from digestion and fatigue to coughs, skin problems, circulation, and recovery after illness. But don't assume these are just old herbs with old stories. Some of the plants on this list were once considered so valuable they were reserved for emperors, elite healers, and the most serious medical cases. And you'll want to stay all the way to the end, because plant number 18 may be one of the most respected healing tonics in all of Chinese herbal history. If you're drawn to forgotten remedies, practical plant medicine, and old world healing that still makes sense today, subscribe to the Green Homestead, because some of the best medicine in the world still grows from the earth. 1. Ginseng, the root that was worth its weight in gold. If someone in ancient China was weak, exhausted, recovering from illness, or simply fading with age, one of the first remedies they might reach for was ginseng, and not casually. For centuries, ginseng was considered one of the most prized healing plants in all of traditional Chinese medicine. Wild roots were so valuable, they were often reserved for the wealthy, the elderly, or people in serious need of rebuilding strength. In some periods, a truly mature root could sell for an astonishing price because people believed it didn't just treat symptoms, it restored life back into the body. In traditional use, ginseng was often given to people who were physically drained, mentally worn down, or slow to recover after sickness. It was seen as a plant that helped restore stamina, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the body when someone felt depleted from the inside out. And modern research helps explain why. Ginseng contains natural compounds called ginsenosides, which have been studied for their effects on energy, stress response, mental performance, inflammation, and immune function. In simple terms, it may help the body cope with physical and mental strain more effectively. That's why it became such a legendary tonic. Not because it was flashy, but because when someone had been worn down by life, work, weather, or illness, this root was often brought in to help them stand back up again. A twisted, slow-growing root from the forest floor. That became one of the most respected healing plants in the East. Sometimes the strongest medicine doesn't force the body, it helps rebuild it. 2. Astragalus, the ancient root for strength and defense. Long before anyone talked about immune support, Chinese herbalists were already using astragalus to help the body stay strong, resist weakness, and recover after being run down. At first glance, astragalus doesn't look like much. It's just a pale yellow root, dry, woody, and unremarkable to most people. But in traditional Chinese medicine, it became one of the most trusted herbs for people who seemed to get sick easily, stayed tired for too long, or never quite felt fully restored after illness. It was often used for people who were depleted, the kind of person who catches every seasonal bug, feels weak after stress, or takes too long to bounce back after being unwell. In old herbal practice, astragalus was seen as a root that helped fortify the body's defenses and build strength over time, not overnight, but steadily. That's one reason it became such a staple in long-term tonic formulas. Modern science has taken interest in astragalus too. It contains compounds such as polysaccharides, flavonoids, and saponins, which have been studied for their potential role in supporting immune activity, reducing inflammation, and helping the body respond better to stress and fatigue. In practical terms, this was never just a cold herb. It was a rebuilding herb. The kind of plant you gave to someone who had been drained by hard seasons, hard work, or hard recovery. And that's what makes astragalus so powerful. It doesn't promise a quick fix. It works more like an old homestead remedy, should slowly strengthening the body so it can protect and carry itself again. A humble root, used for one very important purpose, to help people stay standing. 3. Licorice root, the sweet root that did more than soothe. Most people hear licorice and think of candy, but in traditional Chinese medicine, licorice root was never just a flavor. It was medicine. And for thousands of years, it became one of the most widely used herbs in Chinese herbal practice, not because it was exotic or rare, but because it was useful in so many different situations. If someone had a dry cough, a sore throat, stomach discomfort, weakness after illness, or a formula that needed balancing, licorice root often found its way into the remedy. That's what made it so valuable. It could soothe, it could soften, and it could help the rest of the medicine work more smoothly. In traditional use, licorice root was often used to calm irritation in the throat and lungs, ease spasms or cramping, support digestion, and reduce harshness in stronger herbal blends. In many formulas, it wasn't always the main herb, but it was often the one that helped hold everything together. And modern research backs up a lot of that old wisdom. Licorice root contains active compounds like glycyrrhizin and flavonoids, which have been studied for their anti-inflammatory, soothing, antimicrobial, and protective effects, especially for the throat, respiratory system, and digestive tract. That helps explain why this root lasted so long in herbal medicine, because it wasn't just used for one thing. It was used whenever the body needed calming, coating, or support. A sweet root from the earth that became one of the oldest comfort remedies in Chinese medicine. Not loud, not dramatic, just reliable. And sometimes that's exactly what real healing looks like. 4. Ginger, the kitchen root that warmed the body back to life. If someone in the ancient world had chills, nausea, poor digestion, or the heavy, sluggish feeling that comes with the start of sickness, there was a good chance ginger was already being prepared. Not in a capsule, not in a supplement bottle, but sliced, boiled, crushed, or steeped the old-fashioned way. In traditional Chinese medicine, ginger has been used for centuries as one of the most practical and dependable healing plants around. It was especially valued for people who felt cold, weak in digestion, or unsettled in the stomach. And that makes sense, because some of the oldest remedies were not about overpowering the body, they were about helping it warm up, move again, and function properly. Fresh ginger was often used when someone had early cold symptoms, nausea, poor appetite, bloating, or digestive discomfort. It was also commonly used in food and herbal preparations to help improve circulation and wake up a sluggish system. Modern science helps explain why this root earned such a strong reputation. Ginger contains compounds like gingerol and shogal, which have been studied for their anti-inflammatory, digestive, anti-nausea, and circulation-supporting effects. It's one of the rare herbs that feels both ancient and immediately understandable. You use it, and you feel it. The warmth, the movement, the settling of the stomach. That's why ginger has survived in healing traditions all over the world, because it works in the kinds of everyday problems people actually have. A knobby root from the soil that helped warm the sick, steady the stomach, and get the body moving again. Simple, common, and far more powerful than it looks. 5. Goji berry, the longevity fruit of the mountains. For centuries in Chinese herbal tradition, goji berries were not seen as an ordinary fruit. They were seen as a nourishing tonic, something to be taken not just when you were sick, but to help keep the body from wearing down too quickly in the first place. That's a big reason they became so respected. In traditional Chinese medicine, goji berries were often used to support strength, vision, vitality, blood, and long-term resilience. They were especially valued for people who felt drained, overworked, aging too quickly, or weak after stress and illness. In other words, they weren't just for survival, they were for preservation. Goji berries were often added to broths, teas, porridges, and tonic recipes because they were considered gentle enough for regular use, yet powerful enough to help nourish the body over time. In old herbal systems, they were associated with helping replenish what exhaustion, overwork, and age slowly take away. And modern research has made them even more interesting. Goji berries contain antioxidants, carotenoids, polysaccharides, vitamin C, and other plant compounds that have been studied for eye health, immune support, inflammation, and protection against oxidative stress. That helps explain why this small red fruit developed such a strong reputation for longevity and vitality. It wasn't just folklore. People kept using it because it seemed to help them stay stronger, clearer, and more nourished. A bright red berry from ancient Asia that became one of the most trusted foods for long life and quiet strength. Not a miracle fruit, just an old one with a very long history of helping people endure. 6. Schisandra, the berry that helped hold the body together. Some healing plants were used to push the body harder, but Schisandra was different. In traditional Chinese medicine, Schisandra was valued for something more subtle and in many ways more important. It was used to help the body hold on to its strength. This small red berry has been used in Chinese herbal practice for centuries as a tonic for endurance, stress, lungs, and overall vitality. It was often given to people who felt worn thin, those who seemed to be leaking energy from every direction, whether through chronic fatigue, overwork, weakness after illness, or that deep kind of depletion that doesn't go away with one good night of sleep. That's one reason Schisandra became so respected. It wasn't seen as just a boost. It was seen as a plant that helped preserve what the body was losing. In traditional use, Schisandra was often associated with helping support the lungs, calm the mind, reduce excessive weakness, and strengthen recovery after prolonged stress or sickness. It was also valued because of its unusual taste profile, often described as containing all 5 flavors in Chinese medicine, which made it especially symbolic and memorable. Modern research gives this old berry even more credibility. Schisandra contains compounds called lignans, along with antioxidants and other plant chemicals that have been studied for their effects on stress adaptation, liver support, inflammation, and mental and physical resilience. That helps explain why it stayed in use for so long. Because some herbs don't just help you recover, they help you stop unraveling. A small mountain berry, trusted for helping the body keep itself together when life was trying to pull it apart. 7. Chinese skullcap, the bitter root used when the body was burning, when the body was hot, inflamed, feverish, swollen, or fighting off something serious. Traditional Chinese medicine often turned to herbs that could cool things down fast, and one of the most respected among them was Chinese skullcap. This is not the decorative garden skullcap some people know in the West. This is a deeply medicinal root with a long history of use in Chinese herbal formulas for fevers, infections, respiratory problems, inflammation, and internal heat. It became especially valued when someone's illness felt hot in every sense: burning throat, angry cough, restless fever, inflamed tissues, or that overheated feeling that often comes with infection. In traditional use, Chinese skullcap was often brought in when the body seemed to be in a state of irritation or internal fire. It was considered especially useful for helping settle heat in the lungs, digestive system, and upper body, which made it an important herb in old remedies for serious discomfort. And modern science has found some very interesting compounds inside it. Chinese skullcap contains flavonoids, such as baecolin and baecoline, which have been studied for anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, antimicrobial, and immune-supportive properties. Researchers have also looked at it for respiratory health and tissue protection. That helps explain why it lasted, because when someone was burning up with illness, this root was one of the plant's healers trusted to bring the fire back down. Not a gentle kitchen herb, not a comfort tea, but a serious medicinal root used when the body needed cooling, calming, and relief. Some plants nourish, some strengthen, and some are brought in when the body is clearly under attack. 8. Chrysanthemum, the flower that cooled the head and cleared the eyes. Not every healing plant looked powerful. Some looked delicate, beautiful, almost too gentle to be medicine. and chrysanthemum is one of them. For centuries in traditional Chinese medicine, this bright flower was used not just for beauty or tea, but for very practical problems that people dealt with all the time: headaches, feverish heat, eye strain, dizziness, and that heavy pressure that comes from too much heat in the upper body. In old herbal practice, chrysanthemum was often used when someone felt hot in the face, foggy in the head, irritated in the eyes, or uncomfortable from a rising kind of internal heat. It was commonly steeped into teas and used as a cooling, clearing remedy, especially when the body felt overstimulated, overheated, or inflamed. And when you think about daily life in the ancient world, sun, smoke, dust, long labor, and no easy relief, it makes sense why a flower like this would become so loved. It was simple, accessible, and often effective. Modern research has shown that chrysanthemum contains flavonoids, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory compounds, which may help explain its long use in supporting eye comfort, calming inflammation, and reducing oxidative stress. That gives this old flower more weight than most people expect, because it wasn't used just to make a pleasant drink. It was used to bring relief to the parts of the body that often suffer. First, when heat and stress build up, a soft flower, used like medicine for a tired head, irritated eyes, and an overheated system. Proof that some of the most useful remedies don't look dramatic at all. 9. Mugwort, the warming herb of ancient Chinese healing. Some plants were used to cool the body, but mugwort was used for the opposite reason. It was used to bring warmth back where warmth had gone missing. And in traditional Chinese medicine, that made it incredibly important. For centuries, mugwort has been associated with one of the most famous practices in Chinese healing: moxibustion, the burning of dried mugwort near specific points on the body to help stimulate circulation, warmth, and internal movement. This wasn't a random folk custom. It was a respected therapy used when the body felt cold, stagnant, painful, or weak. In traditional use, mugwort was often brought in for people dealing with deep chills, poor circulation, abdominal discomfort, menstrual pain, joint stiffness, and weakness that seemed to worsen with cold weather or internal cold conditions. It was valued not because it numbed the body, but because it helped wake it up. That's what made it different. It was not just an herb, it was a warming tool. Modern studies on mugwort and related species have looked at its volatile oils and plant compounds for possible anti-inflammatory, circulation-supporting, and pain-relieving effects. And while the ancient method of use is still what makes it famous, science helps explain why this herb may have felt so powerful in practice. Because when the body is cold, stiff, and not moving well, warming can feel like healing. A rough, aromatic plant, used not in soups or salads, but in one of the oldest hands-on healing traditions in Asia. Some remedies soothe, some strengthen, and some bring heat back to places that have gone cold for too long. 10. Peony root, the elegant flower with a serious medicinal side. Most people see a peony and think of a garden flower: soft petals, bright blooms, something ornamental. But in traditional Chinese medicine, the real value of peony was often hidden underground, in the root. For centuries, peony root became one of the most respected herbal medicines in Chinese practice, especially for conditions involving pain, tension, cramping, circulation, weakness, and imbalance in the blood. It was often used in formulas for people whose bodies felt tight, uncomfortable, depleted, or irregular in ways that seemed to affect both energy and pain. That made it far more than a decorative plant. In traditional use, peony root was often valued for helping relax tension, soften discomfort, and support smoother internal balance, especially in conditions involving abdominal pain, muscular tightness, menstrual discomfort, and stress-related physical symptoms. In other words, it was one of those herbs that didn't just treat a symptom. It helped calm the whole pattern underneath it. Modern research has found compounds in peony root, such as peoniflorin, which has been studied for anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, pain-modulating, and immune-related effects. That helps explain why it earned such a strong reputation in one of the world's oldest herbal systems. Because pain is not always loud. Sometimes it's tightness. Sometimes it's cramping. Sometimes it's the body quietly struggling to stay in balance. And peony root became one of the old remedies people trusted when that balance started to slip. A beautiful flower above ground with a deeply practical medicine below it. Sometimes the most elegant plants are doing their real healing where nobody can see it. 11. Rehmannia, the dark root for deep exhaustion. Some illnesses don't just make you sick, they leave you drained. They take something out of the body that doesn't come back quickly. Your strength, your color, your stamina, your ability to feel fully alive. And for that kind of depletion, traditional Chinese medicine often turned to Rehmannia. This dark, sticky root has been used for centuries in Chinese herbal medicine as a rebuilding herb, especially for people who seemed deeply worn down after illness, aging, overwork, blood loss, or long-term weakness. It was often used not for quick symptom relief, but for the kind of recovery that had to happen slowly underneath the surface. That's what made it so respected. Rehmannia was often brought in when someone looked and felt depleted from the inside out. In traditional use, it was commonly associated with helping nourish the body after long periods of dryness, weakness, fatigue, and internal depletion. It became especially important in formulas meant to restore what had been gradually lost through stress, age, or prolonged sickness. And while that may sound abstract, anyone who has ever gone through a long recovery understands exactly what that means. Modern research has found that Rehmannia contains compounds such as iridoid glycosides, which have been studied for anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and tissue protective effects. It has also been explored for fatigue, immune balance, and support during physical stress. That helps explain why this strange-looking root stayed in use for so long. Because some remedies are not for the first day of sickness, they're for the weeks after when the body is still trying to find its way back. A dark, earthy root, used when healing, had to go deeper than surface symptoms. 12. Codonopsis, the everyday tonic for a run-down body. Not everyone could afford ginseng, and not everyone needed something that powerful. That's part of why Codonopsis became so loved in traditional Chinese medicine. Sometimes called poor man's ginseng, Codonopsis was used for centuries as a gentler, more accessible tonic for people who were tired, weak, undernourished, or slow to recover. It wasn't seen as a dramatic miracle herb. It was something more practical than that. It was a rebuilding plant for ordinary people. The kind of herb you gave to someone who had been overworked, underrested, stressed, or worn down by daily life. In traditional use, Codonopsis was often used to support energy, digestion, appetite, and general vitality, especially in people who looked pale, weak, or easily exhausted. And that made it incredibly useful, because most people don't need a heroic medicine. They need something steady, something that helps the body get stronger without pushing it too hard. Modern research has looked at Codonopsis for its polysaccharides, saponins, and antioxidant compounds, which may help explain its traditional use for fatigue, digestion, immune support, and stress resilience. That gives this humble root a lot more weight than its nickname suggests. Because Codonopsis was never just cheap ginseng, it earned its own place, a simple root trusted by generations of herbalists for helping tired people rebuild themselves one day at a time. Not flashy, not rare, just dependable. And in real herbal medicine, that may be one of the most valuable qualities a plant can have. 13. Dang Gui, the root, known as female ginseng. If there is one root that appears again and again in traditional Chinese medicine, it's Dang Gui, also known as Chinese angelica. This herb has been used for centuries as one of the great blood-nourishing and circulation-supporting plants in Chinese herbal tradition. It became especially famous for women's health, but its use went far beyond that, because blood, strength, warmth, and recovery matter to everyone. In old herbal practice, Dangui was often used for people who felt weak, pale, depleted, cold, or slow to recover after stress, childbirth, blood loss, or long periods of strain. It was also valued for discomfort tied to poor circulation and internal stagnation, making it one of those herbs that was often brought in when the body seemed undernourished and stuck at the same time. That combination made it powerful. It wasn't just about replacing what was lost. It was about helping the body move and rebuild again. Modern research has found compounds in dangui such as ferulic acid, ligostylide, and polysaccharides, which have been studied for circulation, inflammation, pain modulation, and tissue support. That helps explain why it remained such a foundational herb for so long. Because when the body is depleted, cold, and not recovering well, sometimes what's needed is not stimulation. It's nourishment with movement. A fragrant root from one of the world's oldest herbal systems, trusted for helping the body restore what had been drained away. No wonder it earned a name like female ginseng. It wasn't ornamental medicine. It was serious recovery medicine. 14. Jujube, the ancient fruit for strength and calm. Some remedies were bitter, some were intense. But jujube was different. This small red fruit, also known as the Chinese red date, became one of the gentlest and most beloved healing foods in traditional Chinese medicine. It was often used not because someone was in crisis, but because they were worn down, weak, anxious, underfed, or simply not recovering the way they should. And that made it incredibly useful. Jujube was often added to broths, teas, porridges, and herbal decoctions because it was seen as a nourishing, calming fruit, something that could help support digestion, restore energy, and gently strengthen the body after stress or illness. In traditional use, it was often associated with helping the body recover from weakness, while also calming restlessness and helping people feel more settled. That's part of what made it special. It fed and soothed at the same time. And in old world healing, that combination mattered. Because sometimes, what a person needs most is not a harsh intervention, but something nourishing enough to help them stabilize. Modern research has found that jujube contains antioxidants, polysaccharides, vitamin C, and plant compounds that have been studied for immune support, sleep, stress response, and inflammation. That helps explain why this fruit lasted as both a food and a medicine. Because it was simple, easy to use, easy to tolerate, and quietly helpful. A small wrinkled fruit, used for strength, comfort, and recovery when the body needed gentleness more than force. Proof that not all medicine has to be bitter to be effective. 15. Honeysuckle flower, the old remedy for heat, swelling, and sore throat. When someone came down with a feverish illness in the old world, a red throat, swollen glands, inflamed skin, or the kind of heat that made the whole body feel irritated, traditional Chinese medicine often turned to herbs that could clear heat and toxicity, and one of the most famous among them was honeysuckle flower. This fragrant, climbing flower may look delicate, but in Chinese herbal medicine it became a respected remedy for sore throats, infections, feverish conditions, skin eruptions, and inflammatory illness. It was especially valued when the body seemed hot, swollen, or overwhelmed by something spreading internally. In traditional use, honeysuckle flower was often brewed into teas or included in formulas when someone showed signs of inflammatory heat in the throat, skin, or upper respiratory system. It became one of those herbs people remembered because of how often those problems showed up in everyday life. And when a remedy gets used again and again over generations, it usually means it earned its place. Modern research has found that honeysuckle contains chlorogenic acid, flavonoids, and other bioactive compounds that have been studied for antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and immune-supportive effects. That helps explain why this flower stayed in herbal medicine for so long, because when the body was hot, swollen, and clearly fighting something, this was one of the plant's healers trusted to help cool it down. A sweet-smelling flower, used not for perfume, but for sickness. Beautiful to look at, but remembered because it was useful when people needed relief. 16. Dandelion, the common weed that Chinese healers never ignored. Most people walk past dandelion without a second thought. They see a weed, something to pull, mow over, or throw away. But in traditional Chinese medicine, plants like dandelion were never dismissed so easily, because healers learned a long time ago that some of the most useful medicines don't come from rare forests or distant mountains. Sometimes they grow right under your feet. In Chinese herbal tradition, dandelion has long been used for problems involving heat, swelling, skin eruptions, sore throat, breast inflammation, and internal irritation. It became especially valued when the body seemed inflamed, puffy, tender, or toxic in the old herbal sense, meaning something hot, swollen, or infected-looking was beginning to build. That made it a practical remedy, not glamorous, not legendary, just consistently useful. In traditional use, dandelion was often prepared as a tea, poultice, or decoction, and used when people needed something cooling, cleansing, and supportive during inflammatory conditions. And modern science has found that this ordinary plant contains bitter compounds, flavonoids, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory plant chemicals that may help explain why it earned such a strong place in old medicine. Because when a plant keeps showing up in different cultures for the same kinds of problems, it usually means people noticed something real. A common field weed, used for swelling, heat, and irritated tissue long before anyone called it a superfood. Proof that one of the oldest lessons in herbal medicine is still true. Don't underestimate the plants everyone else overlooks. 17. Lotus, the sacred plant that nourished more than the body. Some plants were used because they were strong, others because they were reliable. But lotus became important for another reason too. It carried a sense of purity, calm, and restoration that made it one of the most respected plants in Chinese culture and medicine alike. And unlike many healing plants that rely on one useful part, lotus offered almost everything. The seed, the root, the leaf, and even the flower all found their place in traditional use. In traditional Chinese medicine, lotus was often used to help with digestive weakness, internal heat, restlessness, loose bowels, fatigue, and recovery after stress or illness. Lotus seeds in particular became valued as a nourishing food-like medicine, something gentle enough to use regularly, but useful enough to be remembered for centuries. That's what made lotus special. It didn't feel like harsh medicine. It felt restorative, the kind of plant you gave to someone whose body and mind both needed. Settling. Modern research has found that different parts of lotus contain alkaloids, flavonoids, antioxidants, starches, and calming plant compounds, which may help explain its long use for digestion, inflammation, blood sugar support, and stress-related imbalance. That helps explain why lotus endured. Because not every remedy is meant to fight. Some are meant to restore. A plant rooted in mud, but long associated with clarity, nourishment, and healing. And maybe that's why it lasted, because lotus reminded people of something ancient and simple. Even in difficult conditions, something clean and useful can still grow. 18. Reishi mushroom, the ancient tonic. Once reserved for the powerful, for thousands of years, reishi mushroom was not treated like an ordinary remedy. It was treated with reverence. In ancient China, reishi became known as a mushroom of longevity, vitality, endurance, and spiritual strength. It appeared in art, medicine, folklore, and imperial tradition. In some periods, it was considered so rare and so valuable that it was associated with emperors, nobility, and the search for long life itself. That alone tells you something. People did not keep honoring this mushroom for centuries by accident. In traditional Chinese medicine, reishi was often used as a deep tonic for people who were run down, aging, weakened by stress, recovering from illness, or struggling with long-term exhaustion. It was also valued for calming the body and mind, making it one of those rare remedies that was seen as useful for both physical resilience and inner steadiness. And that's a big reason it became legendary. Reishi wasn't just thought of as medicine for one symptom. It was seen as a mushroom that helped support the whole system. Modern research has found compounds in reishi such as beta-glucans, triterpenes, and polysaccharides, which have been studied for immune support, inflammation, stress response, sleep, and overall resilience. That helps explain why it has never really disappeared. Because when a remedy helps people feel more stable, more resistant, and more capable of enduring life, they remember it. A dark, woody mushroom from the old forests of Asia, once prized like treasure. And after all these centuries, it may still be one of the most respected healing tonics ever used in traditional Chinese medicine. Not because it was trendy, but because generation after generation believed it helped people last. And that's the incredible thing about traditional Chinese medicine. These weren't random plants people experimented with once and forgot. They were used, trusted, refined, and passed down for generations, because again and again, they proved useful when people were in pain, weak, sick, inflamed, exhausted, or trying to recover with what they had around them. And maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. Some of the most powerful healing knowledge in the world didn't begin in a laboratory. It began in gardens, forests, kitchens, and the hands of people who learned how to work with the plants around them. If this video opened your eyes to what these ancient healing plants can really do, make sure to subscribe to the Green Homestead for more forgotten remedies, practical plant medicine, and old world knowledge that still matters today. And before you go, comment below, which of these healing plants surprised you the most? And which one would you actually keep in your own homestead medicine garden? We'll see you in the next one.